Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Creative Minds podcast. Joining me here is Sandy. Sandy, I met you a couple of months ago, and I'm so excited to have you on my podcast. I don't want to introduce you. I want you to introduce yourself. So, can you please tell us a bit more about you and who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Of
I'm
course.
Sandy Grigsby. I am a personal branding image expert. What that means is I help people really truly understand how to show up as themselves so they can launch whatever it is they're doing. So you need a personal brand for that. So I help people do that. And I also help people find their confidence so that they can feel comfortable in their own skin when marketing themselves and putting themselves out into the world.
Mm. Awesome. And I want to try this new thing where we kind of go back to where you started in your childhood and how you grew up and how that led you to where you are now. So,
Mhm.
can you give me an idea of like how your childhood was like, how was school like, his family, briefly?
Wow. Okay, that's pretty big. Okay. I was born in Switzerland
Oh,
to
wow.
a Swiss mother, and my father was American Black.
Wow.
So that started off differently than most people. Born in Switzerland, my family moved to the US. They chose the San Francisco Bay Area because at that time they felt that it was going to be the safest for a biracial family. My
Mm,
dad was originally from Texas, and they couldn't stay in Switzerland anymore at that time for work reasons. So my dad and mom moved with us to San Francisco Bay Area. I grew up in South San Francisco in a little town called San Bruno. And then my mom and dad worked in the city. And after a while, they decided they needed to upsize because they were having another baby. So they moved us to Fremont, California, which is where I spent most of my youth.
mm,
And my childhood was interesting in the fact that we moved to a community that was a melting pot. So it was every nationality you can imagine. I grew up in a
mm.
cul-de-sac. So there were Indians, Greeks, Japanese, Chinese, Puerto Ricans. I mean, you name it, we had everyone in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
And it was great. But at the same time, I never felt like I fit in. My dad was the only
Mm,
Black guy in the whole area. I think we had another Black family moved in when I was almost 20. So it was much later, but
mm,
pretty much I was the only one who was half Black. And same thing at my school. I was the only girl.
mm.
Everyone else was white, Indian, Chinese, or something else, but
Yeah.
no one was Black. So I didn't really feel like I identified with any particular group. And I bounced from group to group to group because
Mm,
no one looked like me.
mm,
No one acted like me. My mom raised me with European traditions,
mm.
but then my dad was, ex Air Force, very strict. Everything had to be a certain way. And I just never felt like I fit in. So that was my childhood growing up. I also had my dad being an incredibly dominant totalitarian. He actually called himself the totalitarian daddy. So he controlled everything. He controlled what instrument I played. I wanted to
Wow.
play the flute or clarinet. Nope, had to play the trumpet. He controlled what I did at school. So I wanted to be in gymnastics. I'm sorry, I wanted to be in gymnastics and then cheerleading, but he wanted me to do karate. So he was
Mm,
controlling of everything, and it made me really insecure and uncomfortable as a child. And
mm.
then not fitting in, I always felt like something was off and something was wrong. So that was pretty much my
Wow.
childhood growing up.
Wow. Wow. So when you kind of first moved to California, you felt there's multiple different nationalities, but you felt kind of alone and didn't fit in.
Mhm.
Why do you feel that your race was something that was a barrier for you to belong or fit in?
And I'm going to answer that. So I had mentioned the melting pot, everyone in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
Well, when I say they were Greek or they were Puerto Rican or they were Indian, they really were. They spoke those languages in their homes. So the children were raised across the street Greek. They spoke fluent Greek. We
Mm,
had Persians next door, fluent Persian. Like they didn't have any mix in their households. It was
mm,
exclusively that. So I would go to their homes, and
mm,
like, for example, our neighbors across the street were Indian, which I
mm.
loved going to their parties because they had the best parties and the best food, right?
Yeah.
But everyone would speak their language there, and I couldn't speak it. I would
Mm,
go to the house of the Japanese, everyone would speak Japanese. I
mm,
even would go to the house of, we had a Jewish family lived on the street, and they would speak Yiddish. Right? I didn't understand them.
mm.
So I didn't fit in right then and there. And then they would kind of concede and speak English to me because I was the girl that didn't speak that language.
Yeah.
And and then going to school, my mom taught me things in a different way. We did everything the European way. So there were some basic things that I didn't understand at school, and I was too afraid to ask my dad. So I'd ask my mom, and she actually didn't know. I remember she would tell me, I was like, what's this? And she'd be like, and she'd give me the wrong answer because she'd never experienced it or heard it before, right?
Yeah.
And then I would go back to school and look like a ding-a-ling because I didn't know what I was talking about, right?
Yeah.
So I just never fit in. And then the American kids, their traditions, the way they ate, the foods they ate, the things they did, the way they lived was totally different from me. So I just never felt like I fit in. It was just every single culture, but yet I didn't have one that I identified with. And my father, even though he could speak all these languages, he spoke Spanish, Italian, German, English. I'm sure there was another one he spoke. He only spoke English to me. And my mom, she spoke Swiss German, French, Italian, Spanish, all of these languages. But she spoke English to me because I refused to speak German back to her because no one else spoke German in our community. So, and then I was also really skinny. I was that girl with the skinny legs, and my mom didn't know how to manage my naturally curly hair. Believe it or not, my hair was as curly as yours, if not curlier. Mom didn't know what to do with it. So this was back in the 80s, the 90s. She would just blow dry it and brush it. Well, that makes an afro.
Yes, that doesn't work. Yeah.
Right? And it was a horrible. So now imagine I'm the only kid at school. You have all these different nationalities, all these different kids, but the hair from Asian is usually thick and heavy and long and perfect, right? Yeah. And then you have white girls that have the blonde hair, the straight hair, the heavy, pretty hair. Yeah. And we didn't have any black girls. So I didn't have anyone to like associate with for that. Yeah. And I just had a big afro. So my mom brushed out my afro. Yeah. And but it wasn't even like a good afro. It wasn't like, you know, when you think of like the 70s and you beautiful black models with that perfectly sculpted hair. No, it wasn't like that. It like had like a tent shape that just puffed out. And then to make it worse, when I was a little girl, I had really long hair and I was proud of it because I wanted to be Rapunzel, right? With the long flowing hair. And my mom didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to deal with it. So I'd always get matted in the back. So my dad told my mom to cut it off. And he told my mom, don't tell her I said cut it off, just cut it off. And so I didn't want it cut off. And she said, I'm going to take off an inch. And she took off all of it. And I had a bob to my chin. So now imagine a tent-shaped bob to your chin that goes out like this. It was humiliating. Everyone made fun of me. And to top it off, in retrospect, looking back, this was great, but back then it really was horrible. I was the very first kid in my school to get braces. So here I am in the 5th grade, metal mouth. No one else had them. Everyone teased me all through elementary school. It was humiliating. And now that's why I say it in retrospect, looking back, in the 7th grade, I finally got them off. So I had pretty teeth and everyone else got them that year. That was nice at least.
But then how did you look? I mean, what would you say you identify yourself as? Like when you were part of that community, who were you? Oh, wow. Okay.
I didn't know how to identify myself. Wow. And I think in high school, we had like 3 black kids and they were like aliens to me. I didn't understand. Like I didn't, the way they lived, the way they spoke, everything was so different. And so I didn't feel even connected to them. As a matter of fact, I remember as a little girl, about 5 years old, my father and mother took us all, no, I must have been 6 now because my brother would have been a baby. So I was 6. They took us to Texas to see my grandma. And I still remember walking in and my grandma was like this big, heavy black woman. She had diabetes. And the one thing about her having diabetes was she had candy bars everywhere. And that's the one thing I loved. I would go in her house and I would like dig around for like those almond joys, you know, with a little coconut chocolate covered with the almond. I love those. But I remember she was really heavy. And I was really afraid of her because I had never seen anyone that large before in my life. And I remember her open arms like pulling me in and I was like, ah! And I remember looking at this family reunion and my dad, because his mom had 9 children. So they all had kids. My dad had the least amount of kids. He had 2. The rest of them had, 4, 5, 6 and upwards in numbers, right? So the family reunion had so many people. And I remember thinking to myself as a little girl, I've never seen so many black people before in my entire life. I was like looking at this sea of black people. I was like, what is this? Yeah. Because where I grew up, everyone was every color, right? Yeah. But it was never one color. Yeah. And it was just a lot. And then I remember my mom taking me to Switzerland. It was the same thing. All white people. I'm like, what is this? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And then when was it that you felt that you started to blend in or connect with people? Was it during university? When did you find your tribe, your group, or was it later on?
it wasn't until much, much, much later on. I would say into my mid to late 30s when I actually started to fit in.
Wow. And
And
how did you fit in? In what sense? Was it race? Was it mindset?
you
How
know,
did you fit in?
it wasn't actually. It
Mm,
was I started going to live events where I got to meet people from all over the world, and all of a
mm,
sudden I felt connected
mhm.
because they were all different races. They
Yes.
spoke all different languages. They had all different backgrounds and experiences and skills. And the one thing that we all had in common is we were searching for something greater. And
Yes.
that's when I finally started to feel like I fit in, because by this point I had enough cultural experience because I had lived overseas and I had done all of these different things, and I could have a conversation about it. And
Yeah.
I knew a little bit about everyone's culture that they
Yeah.
felt like, oh my gosh, she gets me, she sees me.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
then I could see that they were going through the same journey as I was. And that's when I started to finally fit in. And I was in my mid to late 30s by that point.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why I asked you this question, because then you start to, I think the older that you get, the more exposure, the more experience, you start to notice that it's not really the color, it's not really the rate, it's nothing. It's not even religion. It's really person's mindset, their intentions, what they want to do, and their hunger and curiosity to want for more, or the things that you value matches what they value. It's not really about the external things, but really the deep meaning, right?
It
Yeah.
absolutely is. And the best part about it though, like I said, always in retrospect, right? As a kid, you're growing up going lost, like what's happening? I don't understand, feeling
Yeah.
lonely, all of those things. But looking back, I wouldn't trade my upbringing for anything
Mm,
because like I said, I got to experience so many beautiful cultures.
100%.
I
Yeah.
got to hang out with my Iranian family next door. I got to hang out, and they were not Muslim. They were Christians and they left Iran. And then I got to hang out with, we had Palestinian neighbors
Wow.
up the way, and I had all of these different people and all of these different cultures. And then the Americans, just the hardcore white American, born and bred, like
Yeah.
families. I got to hang out with them too. And so it allowed me to experience that. And now I don't live anywhere. We're nomadic.
Yeah.
My fiance and I, we live everywhere. We
Yeah.
live in Dubai. We live in Bali. We go back to the US for a while. We just left your home country of Jordan.
Yeah.
We've been all over, and I don't think we would have been able to do that without the opportunities of experience that I've had growing up. And same thing with my fiance, the fact that he's been multicultural for so long. And he grew up in Chicago,
Oh.
like white
Yeah.
boy, corn fed from Chicago. Family never left Chicago except for to go to
Yeah.
Florida, white boy.
Yeah.
And for him, he loves to experience different cultures and travel. His ex-wife from years ago was Greek. His
Wow.
kids are half Greek. They speak fluent Greek. It's
Wow.
amazing.
Wow. Do you feel that a part of you regrets not learning another language because your parents already knew that? It's like
Oh, no, no, no. I speak a whole bunch of languages.
okay.
I just did it differently than my parents. When
Okay.
I was in high school, of course, I had to study French, and my French is a little rusty, but if I go to France, I can understand them. And if
Mm.
I think for a while or spend some time in it, it comes back and I can speak just basic stuff like order things and get directions. But I speak fluent Spanish. I
Nice.
actually speak fluent German as well. I studied my senior year of high school in Germany for a year because I
No.
didn't want to learn my mom's German, which was Swiss German, because it's
Okay.
kind of the weird German, right? They make
Yeah.
fun of it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you think of the English from the US, so you've got California English, which kind of
Yeah.
sounds like this, like hello
Yeah.
everybody, like yeah, totally, right?
Yeah.
The New Yorkers are a little more tough, like this, right? They
Yeah.
say things like water. I'm gonna get some water.
Yeah.
And then you go to the South where you have the Southern drawl and all the ladies speak like this. Oh,
Yeah.
Donald, that's sweet.
Yeah.
And so if you can imagine Switzerland,
Yeah.
so Germany would be like the Californian, right?
Mm.
And then Switzerland would be like the Southern drawl in the South. They talk
Yeah.
like this,
Yeah.
German. And so I didn't want to learn that.
Yeah.
I wanted to learn the more classic German. So I actually studied abroad in Germany, and that's where I picked up all of
Nice.
my German.
Wow. And how was that exposure for you being abroad, moving away from your family and living there for a while alone. How was that for
You
you?
know, it was amazing because, like I said, my dad was controlling. He was a
Mm,
totalitarian. And the family, because I did a foreign exchange in high
mm,
school, and the family that I stayed with, the mom was very young. The mom and dad, she was 32. And actually, I think her husband was even younger. I think he was about 30.
mm,
So I was 17 living with a 30 and 32-year-old, and they were awesome.
mm,
So they gave me freedom. They let me go out. Her sister was 23 years old. So for a 17-year-old, a 23-year-old is amazing, right? I got to spend time with her and go out and enjoy my life. And it was absolutely freeing. So
yeah,
that was a really wonderful experience. But then I did come home to my dad being very controlling again.
yeah.
So that's why I learned Spanish, because then after the controlling, it caused me to flee again, because I fled the first time. The
Mm,
second time I fled, I studied abroad in Argentina, and that's where I learned my Spanish.
wow. And then, so you finished high school, did abroad, and I came back. And then, did you go to university?
Yeah, so I finished high school in Germany, came back, went to San Francisco State University.
Okay.
My sophomore year, I decided I wanted to study abroad again because dad was making me crazy.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I applied for their study abroad program to Argentina.
Mhm.
And the only reason I got accepted, I was the youngest student at San Francisco State
Wow.
University to get accepted because they only take juniors.
Mm.
I got accepted because of my experience living in Germany. So
Wow.
then I packed my bags. I lived in Argentina for 6 months. I went to University of Belgrano there, and that was an amazing experience. A lot of growing up to do there. The one mistake I made, though, was I hung out with a lot of the expats. So the exchange students from Australia and Italy and the UK and all those other countries, as opposed to spending more time with the Argentinians. My Spanish would probably be stronger if I had, but it's okay. I still get
Yeah.
by.
Yeah. Of course. And after university, did you go back home or what did you do afterwards?
So after university in Argentina, I did go back home, and my dad got 10 times worse than he had been before. Super strict, super like severely controlling.
Oh,
I wasn't allowed to date. And then when I finally convinced him to allow me to go on a date, and keep in mind, I'm like 20, right?
yeah.
Uh, a guy, I'll never forget this, he picked me up. And before I knew he was at our door, I was upstairs getting ready. My dad was watching in the peephole and saw him approach and open the door before he could ring the doorbell and was like, hello, come in.
Yeah.
And I didn't know.
Yeah.
And what my dad had also done while I was getting showered and prepped was he went around on every single ledge in the whole entire house and measured exactly 2 inches apart. And he put those tall shotgun bullets, which
What?
we didn't even own those. I don't even know where he must have gone deliberately shopping for them because we didn't have a gun.
Yeah.
And he bought a shotgun,
Oh my
and
God.
he had a shotgun. He had a sawed-off rifle, which was like some antique that didn't even work, but it looked scary enough.
Yeah.
And he had a stuffed duck, which no idea where that came from because we didn't
Yeah.
even have a stuffed duck.
Yeah.
And every single ledge were little bullets, right? Big bullets, actually, because those are shotgun ones.
Yeah.
And I walk into the kitchen, and there's my
Yeah.
date sitting at the dinner table.
Yeah.
And there's guns and bullets. And I'm like, and my dad starts messing with him in the worst way possible. This guy looked like he was going to cry. And by the end of it, my dad goes, so you'll have her back by 10 p.m.? I was home at 8:50.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Did you see him again ever since that date?
Well, the guy made a mistake. He underestimated the insanity of my dad's controlling nature and being the top dog in the house.
Yeah.
So the next morning, the guy came by the house, and of course my dad was like spy eyes. And the reason he was spy eyes is because he had these big dogs that he used to show. They were Weimaraners, a German breed. And the dogs would look out the window because they were always looking for cats or strangers or mailmen, right? And so they would always bark when everyone came up.
Yeah.
So my dad would know. So he went and he saw the guy put a letter in the mailbox.
Mm.
So of course I'm sleeping.
Yeah.
And my dad runs to the mailbox and takes the letter as soon as the guy leaves and reads it. And the letter was so sweet. It was like, I really enjoyed my date with you. You're such a lovely person. I would really love it if you could go on another date with me.
Yeah.
And my dad lost his stuff. He went completely ballistic. He came in the house freaking out, yelling at me, yelling at my mom. What kind of crazy nut job guy can't even wait for a few minutes? He has to show up the next morning, propositioning you for another day. He's extreme. He's a psychopath. And he was so brutal that I was so afraid of my dad by that point that I never talked to the guy again.
Oof. Wow.
Yeah. And then the guy spread rumors to everybody that I had a crazy dad who was like into guns or something. I don't know.
Oh my God. And then what happened? Like, how did you now, like, from all of that, like, transition into what you're currently doing?
Well, that made me so angry at my dad because I felt trapped. I felt controlled. I mean, I'm being nice about, what I'm saying, like, oh, he was just a totalitarian. It was a part of it included physical and verbal abuse. I mean, my dad was really controlling, and it caused me to flee again. So I left 3 times. The first time to Germany, the second time to Argentina. The third time I fled, I went to a private university in Los Angeles. And my dad was so controlling, he wanted to dictate what I studied in university. So going to San Francisco State, he told me I had to study international relations, which I hated. He told me I was going to be a foreign correspondent, which I didn't want to be. And then moving to the next school, he also told me that I had to study business and finance, which I didn't want to do. So I was very strategic and I calculated it very well. And I went to a university that only offered 2 types of degrees, a business degree and an arts degree. So the university I went to was called American Intercontinental University. It was a split school. But if you look at the brochure, which I handed to my dad, one side is business. And when you flip through it, it's all business. But if you turn it over and upside down, it's fine art, right?
Yeah.
So I made sure to hand it to him on the business side. And he looked at it, he flipped through, he's like, it's good. Yeah, go there. And then I turned it over and I filled out the application and I submitted it and I got into the fine art school. And I'll never forget, because it was my escape from him, And when I graduated, I did an expedited graduation because I was already I was like halfway through my junior year. I wanted to be done with university. I had done all of my basic education. So I just had to finish my graduate degree, which I got in a year, I think a year and like 1 month. I did it really fast. It was a 2-year program. And I'll never forget at my graduation, I came in magna cum laude. I was actually number 2 in my whole entire class.
Wow.
And I remember I get my, you get your cap and your whole gown thing. You walk down, you get your little plaque thing. I got my tassels and they made a speech. They said, oh, she's number 2. I'm like, number 2. Yeah. And I come down and my dad's all proud. Yeah. And then he goes, wait. Did they say visual communications? And I was like, oops, we forgot to tell him. It's been like a year. And my mom's like,
oh,
and I'm
God.
like, so pissed. Because we had lied to him, even though I came in like practically the top of my class, right? He still was pissed. But then I remember he smiled and he goes, all right, at least you did really well. So he was proud of me for doing well, but he was pissed for me for lying. And then after that, I stayed living in LA and I was able to escape the wrath of my father for a few more years. And then he passed away.
Oof. Wow. Oof. And for you, like, just isn't that traumatic? Like what? Like how did that? Like how did that affect you? In what way? Like I know you said the big part of you was angry at him, but then how did you transition from being angry to wanting revenge to changing your mindset of like I want to forgive him in a sense and move on?
That's the big journey that I went on in my 30s. So in a way, it was trauma because it was traumatic. I mean, my dad was physically, verbally, mentally abusive, and the fact that he controlled everything. He gaslit me all of the time. He gaslit my mother, my brother. And then when he died, I felt he was really nice to me right before he died. And I felt anger towards him because why couldn't he have been that way my whole entire life? Right. And so moving forward in my life, and my dad passed away when I was about 21, 22, it was right around there. And moving forward, it really affected a lot of the relationships that I had with men, which included employers, which included clients, the people I was dating, right? And I felt intimidated by men. I felt weak. I felt insecure about my choices. Nothing I ever did felt right. I kept trying everything. I felt like I had to be perfect all of the time, because when you're with someone who is so controlling to the point where you don't want to ripple the water, right? You want it to stay smooth. So anything would trigger my father. So if I said no to him, it would trigger it. If I didn't do what he asked at the split second he asked, he would blow up. So everything was a trigger for me. So moving forward in my life, if someone in a business relationship asked for something, I would be too weak to say no, because I was afraid that they would react the way my father would react and would be a trigger, and then I would react in a different way. So I did everything in a way that made me seem super sweet and meek and timid and pleasing. I was very pleasing. And coming from a Swiss mom, my mom was raised to be a housewife. She was raised to be pleasing. And that affected my life greatly. It got me caught up in financial situations where I allowed people to take advantage of me financially. It got me caught up in abusive relationships where the guys gaslit me as well and took advantage of me, and both financially, mentally, emotionally, physically, in every which way. It made me make bad choices with friends. I got into relationships with friendships where they took advantage of me. I didn't have the courage to say no. And it wasn't until my 30s, when I wasn't married, I didn't have a kid, I felt like my business was failing, I didn't have a specific career, I changed careers over and over and over again, that I had to take a step back and go, what is wrong with me that every one of my friends are so far ahead of me and I'm way back here? All of my friends have families. All of my friends have kids. All of my friends have a lot of money in the bank. All of my friends have careers they love. All of my friends are doing things. And I'm doing, I didn't want to say nothing because I was always doing something, but I'm not where I'm supposed to be. I'm not even at the level of my friends. And that took me on a journey of an awakening to realize what was wrong with me, which after many, many, many years of self-help books, online classes, live events, audiobooks, meditation, movement programs, group programs, therapy, being in relationships with people who were stronger than myself that could help guide me. All of these things, this took years. I finally came to the realization that everything centered around my own self-love. And that was the most important thing. Through everything, I gave my love for myself away. And I did it to please someone else because I was afraid of a visceral reaction. And when I realized that it all boiled around self-love, everything shifted. I had value for myself. I started asking for what I was worth in my business. I started saying no to people. I started standing up to bullies and totalitarians. I started making better choices with friends. I eliminated a lot of people who were users, abusers, gaslighters, manipulators, got rid of all of them. I started curating my relationships better. I'm not going to say it was perfect every single time, but I got faster and more inept to canceling relationships that weren't working for me. So when you start loving yourself and you truly understand who you are, and you understand that you're the most important thing, and if you're not in love with yourself and you don't take care of yourself, you can't be a better person for others. You stop tolerating things. And that's when everything changed for me.
100%. So you mentioned a few points over here. You mentioned, first of all, gaslighting. Can you give us an understanding of what do you mean by gaslighting?
So gaslighting is something I didn't know what it was for years, and there's different forms of it, but it's when you're in a relationship with a person. And again, this could be a romantic relationship. This could be a parental relationship. This could be an employment situation, a friendship, even a neighbor. This could be someone in your life that you are consistently speaking to, who leads you to believe that you are crazy, wrong, confused, inaccurate, you don't know better, you're unsure, you're unstable. Whatever it is, they lead you to believe something that's not true. So people will gaslight in so many ways. They'll gaslight by saying things about you physically. Oh, you only look good when your hair is down. When your hair is pulled back, no one ever makes comments about you. You're just not very attractive. But when your hair is down because your hair is so pretty, you are finally beautiful. That's a form of gaslighting. Another way of gaslighting is, oh, no one wants to be your friend. That's why no one ever calls you back. It's because you're not very lovable. You're not very likable. No one really likes you. Haven't you noticed people only call you when they need something? right?
But can I ask you a question here? Isn't it then within your control to choose to listen to that or choose to ignore it? So can you say
Absolutely.
that someone is gaslighting you and you're a victim of gaslighting versus, no, I have the power within me to choose if I want to believe this or not?
Yes, but that also includes that you have self-worth and self-love.
Mm,
So when your self-love is down and low, then you're like, you don't even like yourself.
mm,
Then you are easy to believe them and you don't go, I don't believe you. I don't know
yeah,
what you're talking about. I'm
yeah.
awesome. You're not going to be doing that. If
Mm,
you have low self-worth, you don't value yourself, then you take their word as a higher value than your own,
mm,
which means you're going to believe them. You're going to, really? And remember, gaslighting is a very high form of manipulation.
mm,
So people who gaslight are experienced at it. They know what they're doing. They might not know it consciously, but they know that it's going to get them to the outcome that they want.
yeah.
So they use this form of manipulation and it causes second guessing. So you might go, wait. I know I didn't say that. I know for a fact what you said, I didn't say. And they're like, oh no, you said it. You said it for sure. And then you're like, to your friend, did I say that? They're like, I don't remember you saying, no, I didn't say that. They're like, no, you said it. And here's how. And they'll tell you another scenario that you know you said for sure. And then they'll make you doubt that you actually didn't say something. And they bring it back around to the point where you're like, maybe I did say that. I don't remember saying that, but I must have said that because everything else they said was right. And like, oh, and then you start doubting yourself.
Mm,
Makes sense? So
yeah.
gaslighting is really, it's a tactic that people use to have control and dominance over other people. And they do it over weaker people. A strong
Mm,
person like yourself isn't going to be gaslit very easily,
mm,
but that doesn't mean it can't happen to you.
mm,
Because if it's someone you respect or you love or you value, like a parent or a spouse or a best friend who's been in your life for years and has only done things to help you, when they do finally gaslight you, you are easily succumb to it because you don't expect it.
mm,
So I was gaslit by relationships that I was in, by friendships, all kinds of people. And I had low self-worth and I didn't have self-love. So
mm,
I was easily susceptible to it and I
mm,
couldn't stand up and say no.
mm. And then you talked a lot about self-love. You did mention that you stopped relationships, you cut off certain people, but what does self-love mean to you? How do you love yourself?
Great question. So this is the question that I ask people the most,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
and I ask you this. If you were walking down the street,
Mm,
okay, and you run into someone, you've
mm,
never met this person in your entire life, brand new person, you don't recognize them.
mm.
And you strike up a conversation. First of all, how would you start that conversation? What would you say? You're standing on a street corner, you bump into someone, they smile at you, you smile at them. What would you say?
Hi, how are you doing? Or
Hi,
yeah,
how are you doing?
yeah.
Okay. Here's the little thing I'd like you to add to that scenario.
Mm,
That person that you just ran into, that's you, but you don't recognize them, but
okay.
it's you. So pretty
Mm,
much you just met yourself. So now you have a conversation. What kinds
mm,
of things would you talk about? Probably say, where are you
yeah.
from? For the accent, you probably wouldn't hear an accent because if they're you, they might have the same accent. So to you, it
Yeah.
sounds like no accent, but you might go, whoa, where are you from?
Yeah.
Now, if it's you, you're going to go, I'm from Jordan. How would you
Mm.
react if I told you I'm from Jordan?
Oh wow, I'm from there too. You get excited, you bond on it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then they tell you they have a podcast.
Yeah. No way. Now
Oh,
it's hyped up even more. And it's like, oh,
oh my
can I
God, I
check it
have a
out?
podcast too.
Yeah.
And they pull down their hair and they've got beautiful curls.
Yeah.
What would you say? You
Yeah.
have the same curly hair. Oh my God. And all of a sudden, you would think, what? This person is
Amazing.
amazing, right?
Yeah.
At the end of that conversation, when you have to part ways,
Mm.
would you say you liked that person?
I would say so, yeah. Yeah, because you bonded on so many different things. So from that brief discussion, I'd say so. Yeah.
Yeah. You would probably think they're pretty awesome.
Yeah.
You'd actually probably be really excited to hang out with them again, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That feeling right there, that's self-love.
Mm.
And I've asked so many people this question. The majority of the people I ask go, I would be so awesome. We have so much fun. We watch the same movies. We name our dog the same thing. Like they get all excited, right?
Yeah.
But on the occasion, I get the person who goes, nope, wouldn't like them.
Mm.
And every single time I've gotten someone who says no, I ask why.
Mm.
And you know what their answer is?
No.
Well, I'm not where I want to be in my life. Things just haven't worked out the way I wanted to. And they go into the what ifs and where they're not.
Oh.
And they don't actually focus on the what is.
Mm.
So I always circle them back around. I said, hey, I didn't say you're talking about what isn't. It's what is. And then when they reset it and they go, well, actually, yeah, like you both like cotton candy.
Yeah.
You both like watching Marvel movies. You both like wearing fuzzy socks. And all of a sudden they go, yeah, that person would be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's self-love.
Wow. Interesting way of putting it. And but it does, so you mentioned the big point here. You did mention that the what if part, what if I've done this? And that's a big part of guilt. And I felt then my question here to you is, how did you let go of guilt yourself? Or how do you help people let go of guilt and regret and move on forward? Because it can really hold you back, especially if you're not constantly finding it, being conscious of that thought that's coming up, or even noticing the words that you're saying. You can find yourself like dragged back within a second. You can find yourself like swirling in this negative mindset. So how did you overcome that, or how do you help people overcome that?
Well, first there's two parts. There's the negative mindset, and then there's overcoming things like guilt. So you have to deal with both of those with one simple thing: awareness.
100%.
If you're unaware of it even happening, how can you ever fix it? You can't. So you have to actually be aware enough to notice it. So when it happens, you can reset it. So that's the first thing. So the negative talk, the negative self-talk, those things that I'm not good enough, I can't, I won't, things will never, the what ifs, the negative things, you have to notice them first. Then once you notice them, you have to mentally change them. Right? And if things like guilt, regret, fear, those things are affecting you, I believe that you have to create new rules around how you view those things. So we've all created rules, and another word for these rules are, in a way, habits, right? They're conditions that we've set for ourselves that we repeat. So you might have a habit of, when you see someone get angry with you, you might have had a trauma in the past that someone got angry and it gives you a visceral reaction and you start to shake, right? If you see someone get angry with you, you might shake, and then you might second guess what you said, and then you might feel guilty for something you said, even if nothing that you said was wrong. Okay? So in order to fix that, first you have to be aware of it. You have to notice that it's happening, and then you have to set new conditions around that. So if your visceral reaction was to shake and then second guess yourself and then go along with it because you're feeling guilty, you have to create new rules around guilt. So the way I do it is, I come up with a rule. I will only feel guilty if, and then a condition has to meet that rule. So if let's say I feel guilty because someone's angry at me, right? If I say, I will only feel guilty if someone's angry at me, and then I will concede to whatever they want, that's not a great rule. That's a bad one. That sucks. I don't want to live by that, because that's what I've been doing, right? So now I'm going to create a new rule. And my rule that because I had guilt, it was one of my big ones. So I actually did create a rule for this. But my rule for guilt is, I will only feel guilty if I'm sitting at your home on your white couch, drinking a glass of red wine, and I spill it all over your couch. And I have two parts to this one. I get in my car to drive home and I run over and kill your dog.
Okay.
That sounds extreme. You're like, it's kind of funny because you're like, you would never do that. That's so dumb. And I so rarely drink wine. It's like seriously once a year at most.
Mhm.
And I would never do it on someone's white couch because I know you can spill it. So if I were to even have it that once in a year at most, I would stay far away from the white couch. So it would never happen. But here's the key to your rule. It's plausible and it could. I could be at someone's house and all they have are white sofas. That's it. And they have white, like right now, there's a white sofa here. There's one over there. And there's one in the next room. There's only white sofas in this home. It could possibly happen. And I could have my glass of wine moved by someone and I go to pick it up and someone hits me blue and I spill it. It's something that could plausibly happen. Okay? That's really important. It has to be something that can happen. And I could get in my car and not pay attention and back up and run over their dog. Could also happen. Now I know me, I'm the kind of person that if I know someone has a dog, I'm a little obsessive. Like, is the dog okay? Can you grab the dog? Can you make sure the dog's, because I have animals and I don't want to run over anyone, right? So, can you just, so I'm very mindful of that.
Yeah.
But if I did do those things, I would feel incredibly guilty because that's my rule and my condition and I can follow that. So I give myself permission to feel guilty for spilling red wine on someone's white couch or running over their dog with my car. Okay. But knowing that, I don't give myself permission to feel guilty for anything else. So if I don't call someone back, in the past, I would have felt so guilty. Oh, I didn't respond to them within, an hour or a day. I didn't call them back. I didn't send them this. Oh, I feel so guilty. I completely have obliterated that guilt because I remove it because it doesn't meet my condition. So let's say you promised your friend you would go to their party. You're like, I will be at your party.
Yeah.
And then legitimate things come up and you just can't go. Most people would feel really guilty. I'm going to make up to you. Oh, my friend's going to hate me. No, we don't have time for that kind of guilt. That's just literally a waste of time. So apply your condition. I will only feel guilt if and let's say the guilt is, I will only feel guilt if I walk into a grocery store and I put all of the grapes in my bag and I walk out and forget to pay for it. Okay, which I'm sure it's happened to most people, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I feel so guilty. I didn't pay for these grapes. I just stole from the grocery store. I'm on camera. How embarrassing is the deal? I got to go back and pay for them, right?
Yeah.
But if that's the condition, then if you said to your friend, I'm sorry, unfortunately, I can't make it today to your birthday party. I would love to make it up to you. Please forgive me. You are not going to feel guilty because were you in a grocery store? No. Did you put the grapes in your purse? No. You walk out without paying for it? No. None of those rules apply. You switch off that feeling of guilt.
Interesting.
And it doesn't work easily on the first time. It's something that you have to keep practicing because everything is a habit.
100%.
Right? So
100%.
you have conditioned yourself to feel guilty if your friend is upset with you. That's a conditioning. So now condition yourself to no longer feel that way and make it clear to them. Do what you have to do to clean up the process. Like, listen, I can't make it. I'm sorry I have work. I'm going to make it up for you. Can we put it on the calendar? Can I take you out to lunch? Can we do this? Can we do that? And then your friends will be like, oh, they're sincere. Okay.
100%.
But you don't need to feel guilty about it because what's that going to get you? 100%. Now you're going to go to work feeling sick and you're not going to be as productive and things going to suck.
100%. And I noticed all of the things that you're talking about, like regret and guilt, all those things were leading back to freedom. And I feel, again, maybe that could have initiated from like your childhood of lack of feeling of freedom. And then now you're kind of working through them step by step to get this now, instead of like physical lack of freedom, but now it's like an internal peace within yourself. And that's a freedom that you're kind of releasing through letting go of those guilt, the fears, the low vibrational energy that is only consuming you, but not adding value to your life. So I just noticed that
everything stems from childhood. I tell some of my students that I work with, I'm like, your parents messed you up. Just get over it and move on. But here's the deal. You can't blame them for messing you up because my dad choked me and held me up against the wall. Okay. My dad yelled at me to the point where he screamed at me, chased me up the stairs, broke my door down to get into my room to scream at me and punish me. Like my dad did some horrible things, but looking back, even though it wasn't right and I don't agree with him and I would never be a parent like he was, at the time, he was only doing what he knew.
Exactly. He didn't know any better.
And now that I look back, it was done to him.
Exactly.
Right. And he didn't have the awareness to see that and to change it. He didn't have the guidance. Back then, they didn't have programs to coach people through mental trauma and things like that. It just wasn't available. So when you realize that your parents messed you up, point blank. Maybe your mom left you in a stroller too long crying. Maybe she didn't change your diaper fast enough. And you have now a learned response to that trauma or that uncomfortable situation or that experience that you react with. So now moving forward in your life, you keep repeating that trauma, which in turn becomes a habit. You have the habit of repeating a reaction to a trauma or an experience, right? So now you have to create new rules. And you have to train yourself to abide by that rule, which is why I say create the rules, create new values for yourself, and create a new habit. So I used to be habitually guilty. Almost, actually, nothing makes me guilty anymore. I'll point blank call a friend like, I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. And I mean it sincerely. I love you and I hope you can forgive me. But I don't feel guilty for it because it's not one of my values and it doesn't serve me to feel guilty in that moment. That doesn't mean I don't feel emotion. It doesn't mean I don't feel love or pain. It just means I don't feel guilt anymore. So if the friend can't accept my sincere apology and move forward, then now it's not on me anymore. I'm not going to feel guilty about it.
100%.
Make sense?
100%.
But it's all about habits, about creating habits. It didn't work out that way for the first time for me. I had to
100%.
practice it and practice it and practice it. And now it's super easy.
That's something I wanted to address. Like let's say you learn certain ways of dealing with it, or like you come up with a method to let go of guilt. You're going to do it once, twice, 100, 200 times. And then one day you're going to say you wake up and it clicks, but it's after trying 1,000 times and deciding to quit and then coming back because
awareness,
100%.
Think of how many situations in our lives are that.
Yeah.
Think of how many times you've had someone yell at you and then you point something out and they go, I'm sorry. I didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
Or how many times you've had a deep conversation with a friend and when you see their side and where they're coming from, you start feeling differently towards them. You have more empathy for them, more 100%. Compassion for them, 100%. More understanding because you just have the awareness. And my thing is we can't feel guilty for not being unaware because you only know what you know.
Exactly.
But once you know, you know.
Yeah. And it's once you know, it's now your responsibility to take the action to change it. And if you don't, then I think that's your fault. Like that's genuinely now your fault. But also the awareness that it takes time, that you're not going to do it perfectly. So that's like, it's a bunch of things. But I just want to end it like briefly with one last question. And it's, by the way, thank you so much for the time. Love the conversation. The final question, and it's like, what is your definition of success?
My definition of success? I believe that success is when you are in love with what you're doing. Not passionate, because passion comes and goes. You can be passionate one moment and unpassionate the next, if that's even a word. Not passionate the next. But when you're in love with what you're doing, you're in love with your relationships, you're in love with your lifestyle, you're in love with the way you treat yourself, you're in love with you, you've hit success. Think about it. If you're in love with what you do, you're going to put everything into it and you're going to do it with purpose and intention. And it doesn't even matter if it doesn't work out because you love it. You're successful at it in your own way. Even if you don't make a penny off of it. While you're doing it, if you enjoy the act of doing it, you're successful.
Yeah. It just feels
like you're in flow with
life. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're in love with the person and let's say there are good days and there are bad days, but you're still together because you truly love each other and you work through your relationships, you work through your issues, you work through the good times, the bad times. And at the end of the day, you come together and you're still in love with each other. That's successful. If you are, it's funny because I have friends who go through a divorce after 15 years of marriage.
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
I had a failed relationship. Actually, you had a successful relationship because you were with that person. You were happy with that person for most of the time. You made it work out for 15 years. That was a successful 15-year relationship. And now you're out of that. And now you're ready to do the next successful relationship.
Thank you, Sandy, so much for your time. Where should people find you?
Thank you. I'm active on Instagram. So Sandy in Focus is my handle. And you can find me on TikTok. It's sandyinfocus.com. Yeah, I got locked out of my Sandy in Focus TikTok. So don't follow that one. Sandy in Focus TikTok. Sandyinfocus.com. And then I'm on LinkedIn as Sandy Grigsby.
Perfect. Awesome. I'll tag you below so people can follow you there. Thank you again so
Thank
much
you.
for your time. Really appreciate you. And for everyone listening, I hope you have an amazing, awesome rest of your day.